Well, hey there, it's Brent Adams with Inside Farm Life, and I'm back with a new episode. Episode 4 is out now, and you can find that at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Deezer, Audible, and Odyssey. And this week, we're talking pest control and resistance management strategies with Daren Mueller, who is a plant pathologist with Iowa State University. He brings some great knowledge to the table here, and I hope you'll go and give that a listen. Also, we bring in Rob Larew, the president of the National Farmers Union. And there's a lot to talk about as we kind of assess the first half of 2021, look to what we expect for the rest of the year. We talk about their legislative priorities and some of the things on the radar for the National Farmers Union. Then in Market Talk this week, Jesse Allen is talking about the drought and how it's affecting things out in the West and in the upper Midwest. And then everybody, the hot rod farmer is back, and he wants to know, hey, are you looking for a vehicle for your farm? Maybe you should consider a van, and he's gonna make his case for that. Then we bring in the great traditional country music sounds of Erin Enderlin, who has played the Grand Ole Opry stage 13 times. She's worked with Jamie Johnson. She's been on tour with Willie Nelson. She is one of the best and brightest stars coming out of Nashville these days by way of Arkansas, and I hope you will go and listen to her music, and you'll listen to everything here on this episode 4 of Inside Farm Life. I tell you what, we are getting through this growing season here. I know there's a lot of challenges in some parts of the country, but a lot of opportunities in others. And that's what we try to bring you each week here on Inside Farm Life. So if you haven't already done so, I hope you'll go and subscribe to the podcast. Again, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Deezer, and Audible. And also be on the lookout for farmlifemedia.com, which is going to be coming here in August. We're going to have the podcast. We're going to have the 24/7 internet radio station playing classic country, bluegrass, a little bit of southern rock, a little bit of gospel, and we're going to have a lot of our own original programming on there to educate you, inform you, entertain you. And all of this is just our mission to create the largest farm family on the planet. And we can't do it without you. Also, make sure you're following us on Facebook, on YouTube, and we're going to have some other ways for you to follow in the future. I tell you what, I'm going to get out of here. We're going to get the weekend started here in a bit and get to work on some more of this content that we have coming for you. But again, thank you so much to everybody who has been listening to the show, who's been following us on those live streams. We've got a lot more of those coming, both on the agriculture side and the country music side. If you haven't checked out the one with American Farm Bureau Federation President Zippy Duval from earlier this week, go back and look at that. He brings a lot of great insights, and you'll hear some of those outtakes next week on Inside Farm Life. But for now, this is Brent Adams, and I'm out of here, and I want to present to you this week's episode of Inside Farm Life.
Welcome to Inside Farm Life, your weekly connection to agriculture newsmakers, hot-button industry issues, educational features, and the best in true country music. Now, here's your host, Brent Adams.
Well, welcome to another episode of Inside Farm Life. We thank you for giving us some of your time this week. On this episode, Iowa State University plant pathologist Daren Mueller discusses effective pest control and resistance management, and we catch up with National Farmers Union President Rob Larew to talk about his organization's key legislative priorities for the remainder of 2021 and beyond. We're talking drought in this week's Market Talk report, and the hot rod farmer Ray Bohacz says if you're in the market for a work vehicle around the farm, a van just might be the answer. Then, later in the show, we'll take things back to the country with Grand Ole Opry performer Erin Enderlin. But first, some news. On Wednesday, U.S. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack discussed the need for a modernized guest worker system to address farm worker shortages and underlying issues. USDA Radio's Rod Bain has more.
As lawmakers continued deliberation how best to address issues associated with farm labor and availability.
I'm here today simply to advocate on behalf of American agriculture and these workers to maintain the capacity of this great food and agriculture industry to continue to provide the benefits that we all enjoy in this country, and at the same time to provide the respect and dignity to the farm workers who are working so hard to make this system what it is today.
Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack Wednesday testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee. The latest efforts to assure an adequate-sized ag workforce through modernization guest worker programs is a House bill approved earlier this year, now under Senate consideration. The Secretary noted some of the long-standing issues regarding farm labor that need resolution.
Availability of H-2A workers is always in question. Wage increases or decreases are fluctuating from year to year in an uncertain path. There is a cumbersome process involved. There are uneven worker protections separated from families.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Well, there's a distinct line reflecting both extremes of U.S. pasture and rangeland condition within the latest edition of the Pasture and Rangeland Report. Rod Bain this week spoke with USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey to get the latest.
When it comes to the latest look at U.S. pasture and rangeland conditions,
we continue to see the haves and have-nots. Those living south and east of a line from the upper Midwest to the southern Rockies, things are looking pretty good for the most part. Very dry as you head north and west of that line.
With USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey noting 40% of the nation's pastures and rangelands are rated very poor to poor, while 30% are rated good to excellent.
We have a lot of states across the southeastern half of the country reporting pastures at least 70% good to excellent. That includes a couple of Midwestern states, Missouri and Ohio, a number of states in the east and also in the southeast.
Yet moving into drought-plagued areas further north and west,
we see a remarkable 96% of the pastures and rangelands in Washington state coming in at very poor to poor this week.
Drought conditions that have affected pastures and rangelands in the West and upper Midwest are also starting to creep into parts of the Western Corn Belt, raising concerns about potential impacts to corn and soybeans.
Last week, active weather bringing much-needed rain in parts of the northern plains and upper Midwest. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says since then,
rain has pushed southward, drier air has moved in, and at the same time we've seen heat building eastward from the western United States,
leading to concerns about corn and soybean reproduction in Minnesota and the Dakotas.
It's the time of summer where we have our most critical temperature and moisture requirements for corn and soybeans.
And going into this week in other parts of the Corn Belt,
we do have concerns that 100-degree triple-digit temperatures could reach as far east as eastern Nebraska and perhaps western Iowa. And that's getting into an area where soil moisture, although not critically low, is a bit more marginal. It's been on the dry side. And so heat and drying conditions are a concern across the upper Midwest.
Ticks have a well-deserved bad rap, so to speak.
You get Lyme disease from the black-legged tick, bullseye rash, oh man, you're sick. So go see your doctor if you're feeling sick, especially if you've been bit by a tick.
Yeah.
Our message is to prevent ticks from getting on you by using repellents and careful inspections.
University of Kentucky Extension entomologist Lee Townsend, he says if you are working or hiking in areas of tall grass, shade, wooded areas, first thing, put on repellent on your exposed skin. It may not actually keep the ticks off,
but the repellent will prevent them from actually beginning to feed.
Also keep exposed skin to a minimum. Wear long sleeves, long pants, boots, and spray a special repellent for clothing.
It causes ticks that do latch on to you to drop off quickly.
Still, they're tricky, though, and one might get through all that security, so Townsend says check yourself for ticks every 2 hours to make sure you don't get sick because you were
bit by a tick.
In Washington, Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
And now, what is your goat saying? That is a pretty sweet shirt you got on there. Did you get that from GoatLifeClothing.com? Very humorous and stylish. No, you cannot eat this shirt. I know it looks tasty. GoatLifeClothing.com.
Many companies promise increased yields and a higher return on investment, but again and again, results show that one company stands apart from the rest. Concept Agritech delivers innovative concepts utilizing the latest technologies in agronomy, biology, and chemistry to enhance soil and plant health with seed treatment, planter-applied fertilizers, foliar fertilizers, and full-season soil treatment solutions. To find out how to put Concept Agritech to work for you, visit conceptagritech.com. Concept Agritech, technology where you need it most. Well, next up on Inside Farm Life, in many parts of the country, this is a critical time of the year in the growing season. Those crops face challenges from weather, weeds, disease, and pests, and it can be a constant battle. So today we wanted to bring in Daren Mueller, who's the Associate Professor and Extension Plant Pathologist at Iowa State University. He can't do anything about the weather, but he can help us understand effective pest control and resistance management. Daren, welcome into Inside Farm Life.
Well, thank you.
Well, I tell you what, as we said, this is a critical period in crop development, and mismanagement can threaten yield and rob profitability, which is a scary prospect as input costs rise and there's so much uncertainty in the markets. And the first thing I wanted to tackle here is strategy, because you have to identify the enemy before you can defeat it. What are some of the common pests that we're seeing showing up in farm fields in 2021? And what kind of trends are we seeing with those pests in terms of like regional movement and stronger resistance from year to year?
That's a good question. And really, on the academic side of things, we spend a lot of our time trying to help people with developing resources to help people identify what the heck is going on in their field. And, you know, our hope is that people are going out there and looking. I guess that's the first step, is to take the time and go out and look in your field. But I'm a big fan of sitting in my lazy boy at home, and so I say there's a lot of things you can learn just from, you know, sitting and paying attention and doing your homework. And so, you know, there's a lot of people that are blogging or newsletters that are being written and information that's being shared via social media or whatever it is. And so I encourage people just to figure out what that is for them. Is it between Twitter and Instagram or whatever it is? Just figure out who's the most active out there. That if you're not going to go to your field, then find out who is going into your field in your area and seeing what they're saying. And so you can learn a lot just by sitting in the air conditioning in your lazy boy and figuring out what's going on out there. So.
And when farmers get out there, what are some of the telltale signs of pests, and how can they determine whether the threat or the damage is great enough to warrant an application of a fungicide or herbicide?
So when I walk into a field, a lot of times what I look for, you have to know what a healthy crop looks like. And so know the growth stages, know what's going on, and sort of what the critical stages are in that field. And then, you know, diseases are going to show up. If it's corn, you're going to get northern corn leaf blight or gray leaf spot or some of those things that are fairly common and consistent across the years. And then of course there's going to, you know, there could be a chance for, you know, a disease that's more seasonal or might not show up every year, like southern rust. And so just knowing what those look like and getting out there and identifying them will be an important first step. How I try to figure out, well, is this something worth managing? Then is this sort of, I look at a couple of different things. And plant pathologists, they love their disease triangle. And that is an important concept. You know, you have to have a very susceptible crop, and then you have to have the right environmental conditions, and then you have the pathogen. So if you're out in a field and you see a particular disease, you've taken care of one of those things. You have the pathogen present. So then what you do is you just start going through your notes. Well, the variety I have planted or the hybrid I have planted is particularly susceptible or not to this disease, and so that should give you an idea of how dire is this. If it's a very susceptible line and you're seeing a lot of disease and it's fairly early, you know, the next steps are going to be, you know, you need to take them pretty quickly. If it has a good resistance package, then you might be able to take a deep breath and say, okay, what are my next steps? Then the next thing is the weather. And, you know, you're right, I can't control the weather. If I did, I wouldn't be here at the university. I'd be owning an island somewhere and doing a lot of fishing. But I'd say the one thing you can, I mean, there are resources out there that will help predict what the next month looks like. And so if it is a very dry year, if you're in, you know, you can look at, I usually look at the drought monitor. If you're in a part of the state that is, or a part of the country that is particularly dry, and you don't see any disease, and you have a resistant variety or hybrid, then, you know, you're sort of looking at a low disease situation. But if it's the opposite, if you're in a wet area, like down a little bit further south of Iowa this year, you have a particularly susceptible hybrid, and you walk out into that field and you see a lot of disease, or at least even a little bit of disease, that should trigger it. So I sort of doing your homework, knowing the situation, I guess, is how I would approach it.
Well, Daren, in many cases, dealing with pests means choosing herbicides with multiple sites of action and fungicides with multiple modes of action. What should farmers consider when devising a disease management plan?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that as you're looking at what you're going to be spraying, you sort of have to look at long term. You want these tools to be around and be available to you for the long term. And so what can we learn from the situation with herbicides over the last 10, 15 years. And so on the fungicide side of things, I strongly encourage never to spray something that has just one mode of action. Try to find something that has multiple modes of action. There are resources out there, Crop Protection Network, if you just Google that, they have an efficacy chart for wheat, corn, soybean fungicides. Not all fungicides are going to be equal as far as how well they work against a particular disease. And so again, just do. I think I always say now, like if you asked me 15 years ago, it was a lot easier. Just get out and spray if you have a problem. Now you have to do your homework. Now you have to spend a little bit more time and be thinking long term and be thinking about what's most effective in your field this year.
Well, before we wrap up, I also wanted to focus a bit on cultural non-chemical forms of weed control, specifically cover crops, because I know the practice of cover cropping continues to become more widely practiced each year. I know many farmers still have a lot of questions. If they're still investigating which cover crops might be the best for them or best practices for cover crop management, what questions should they be asking and what resources should they seek?
Well, each university has there's somebody locally that is looking at cover crops, and I'll just use here in Iowa as the example because I'm most familiar with here. But we have a couple of great agronomists, Mark Licht, and several different programs that are looking at cover crops. We have Allison Robertson, who's looking at sort of how cover crops affect diseases, and then we have weed scientists that are looking at it as well. And so across our team of scientists that we have here in Extension and Research at Iowa State, we have people that are looking at it, and we have people in the USDA as well that are looking at it. So locally, and it's going to be different in each state and it's sort of each situation that you're in. So it's a resource that's worth looking at, and I would say that there's going to be a lot of very local knowledge that you can dive into. Just take the time to find it.
Well, there's a whole lot to consider here, and one place to turn, especially for soybean farmers, is the United Soybean Board's Take Action app, which provides farmers with tools to diversify sites of action and modes of action to prevent resistance from creeping up. The United Soybean Board also has herbicide, fungicide, and insecticide classification charts to help you make informed decisions, and all that can be accessed at iwilltakeaction.com/app. Again, iwilltakeaction.com/app. And Daren, we also need to put in a plug for the great work being done by University Extensions, which are another invaluable resource in helping growers determine the best course of action to take in trying to manage herbicide, fungicide, and insecticide resistance.
Well, thank you for the invite. Yeah, I completely agree with you. There's a lot of people that are spending a lot of time trying to help farmers make the best decisions out there. And so hopefully we can all work together and make sure we have solutions now and in the future.
Well, Daren, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on Inside Farm Life. I hope you come back and join us again in the future to talk about plant health and about all the great work being done there at Iowa State University.
You betcha. Anytime.
Again, we've been talking with Daren Mueller, an associate professor and extension plant pathologist at Iowa State University. Gateway Seed Company was founded in 1997 on a simple principle. It doesn't start with the seed, it starts with the farmer. We pride ourselves in doing all we can to understand our customers' farming operations. We take the time to listen to their concerns, then focus on providing a solution to address their specific needs. Gateway Seed offers seed corn with trait packages from Bayer and soybeans with trait packages from Bayer, Corteva, and BASF. To learn more about how Gateway Seed can boost your yields and increase your return on investment, visit gatewayseed.com. Well, next up on Inside Farm Life, it's our pleasure to welcome in National Farmers Union President Rob Larew, who joins us to discuss some of his organization's key legislative priorities for the rest of 2021 and beyond, and just how his members have navigated challenges presented by the pandemic and other factors. And President Larew, welcome in to Inside Farm Life.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot to talk about these days. There's a lot going on in agriculture.
Well, there is, and I'd like to have you and others in key agriculture leadership positions on near the midpoint of the year to give us kind of a status report on how activity in the industry aligns with the key legislative priorities that were set at the beginning of the year. And the National Farmers Union has had a lot on its plate as of late as it continues to fight for farmers and ranchers to get a greater share of that consumer dollar. And there's been a lot of movement on that front lately as President Biden recently signed an executive order aimed at promoting competition and fairness throughout the economy, including the agricultural sector. First of all, overall, do you feel like the executive order was a win for agriculture?
Absolutely. Look, there are a lot of details that go into it, and there's still a lot of enormous questions about exactly how this is all going to be implemented. But I think what's important here for farmers, and I would argue also for consumers, is that we have, for the first time in decades, a monumental shift in the tone as it talks about, kind of farmers in relationship to the marketplace, bringing some more competition to the marketplace. And that's certainly a winning tone. We certainly like some of the provisions in the executive order, and we will be continuing to push for actually some really fundamental and permanent changes going forward.
Well, I know you and I have talked about all the challenges faced by the cattle producers who are seeing a disparity between record profits being reported by the packers and profits being realized by the producers. And this order takes aim at that challenge by directing the USDA to change language in the Packers and Stockyards Act that currently puts the onus on farmers to prove that the entire industry has been harmed by a practice and not individual producers. And that's been a big barrier to creating a level playing field, not only for producers, but smaller packers, which we saw during the height of the pandemic, were desperately needed.
Well, absolutely. And look, we all like capitalism and we like functioning markets. And the Packers and Stockyards Act was originally put in place to protect farmers against unfair practices throughout that market. Although I would argue in several of the recent and past decades, that law has consistently been weakened. And so this effort by the Biden administration, and there have been previous attempts to try to put some more teeth in there, bring some more sanity, and increase producers' power in that marketplace. As you mentioned, the marketplace right now, whether you're talking about ranchers, whether you're talking about hog producers, and you're talking about even chicken contract growers, the marketplace is so stacked against them in so many different ways. And while we want to make sure, and this change in the executive order brings more competition for those poultry growers in their marketplace, but we're seeing shifts in hogs and certainly in the cattle market now, where the power that individual and independent farmers and ranchers have is decreasing all the time. So we need to be doing everything we can to get that marketplace to a working order.
Well, you mentioned those contract poultry growers, and another welcome provision in this executive order aims to change the way contract poultry growers are paid. I know it's been a contentious issue for many years. How would the National Farmers Union like to see this pay system structured?
Really, it's a question about bringing, again, this level of competition, but also fairness. When you have a contract with one of the large poultry companies here, your ability to fight unfair practices and to make sure that any problems that you have with your contract is really the pressure is so much against you. And you actually mentioned one of the provisions that I just think a lot of people don't even understand. If you want to fight an unfair practice, you do, as a poultry grower, have to prove that practice was a disadvantage to the entire industry, not just to you. Well, there's not another industry out here in the U.S. where you have to prove that an entire industry is put at a big disadvantage in order to get some help for yourself. And so this change and the direction for USDA to make these changes to Packers and Stockyards Act, I think, is a step forward. We really do need to see, though, that change put more permanently into the regulations. It was way back in 2008 that the Farm Bill actually directed USDA to do this. They tried for many years. There were a lot of postponements by Congress, and eventually there were rules put out, and then those were delayed. Here we go again. It feels a little bit like deja vu, but the fact remains that farmers and ranchers out there in the livestock sector are at a huge disadvantage, and we need to make these changes to get this more power in the marketplace.
Well, something else this executive order is intended to do is prevent corporations from retaliating against farmers who speak out against unfair practices. And you talk about David versus Goliath. This is a really big deal.
Well, you line that up with this provision having to prove the entire industry. I mean, this is exactly why contract growers, for example, don't speak up because there can be retaliation. You have so much risk in this operation. And really, as you just pointed out, the power structure is shifted completely. And this is a broader issue. Here, these changes in packers and stockyards are really important for livestock growers out there. And there's a lot of other things that we need to do to make cattle markets better. There are a number of provisions and movement for changes up on Capitol Hill right now. But we know that we're seeing such a level of concentration and such reduced power by farmers and ranchers out there all across agriculture, not just in the livestock sector.
Well, to shift gears here, another hot button issue addressed by the executive order is the right to repair equipment. And much of today's equipment is driven by software, and the manufacturers don't sell software repair tools, which means farmers and independent mechanics don't have the ability to fix something when it breaks. And they make the argument that that often costs them precious time and money. And this executive order encourages the Federal Trade Commission to address restrictions on the repair of items. Do you see a resolution in sight on this issue?
I think so. And the reason why I'm actually kind of excited about the momentum behind provisions like right to repair and even some of the changes in Packers and Stockyards Act and some of these other provisions in the executive order is that although it's coming from this White House, these issues and these fundamental questions of fairness and restoring some of the power to independent farmers and ranchers is really a bipartisan issue. There's a lot of bipartisan support. We have a lot of support up on Capitol Hill. And I think as general consumers out there really understand the lay of the land here, farmers who have the latest and greatest equipment because they want to make sure that they are as competitive as possible, but they can't actually work on their own equipment or even diagnose and find out what the problems are and get an independent repair person to check it out. This is not a fair playing field out there. And so I think, again, I am hopeful because this is just a question of fairness. It's not a partisan issue. And right now, this Congress, in this White House, and just the political climate we have, we need to really focus in on these issues that have bipartisan and really just common sense support.
Well, the executive order also addresses the labeling of meat products, which has been a hot topic here the past couple of years. Currently, animals born in the U.S. and raised in other countries can be labeled a product of the USA, but the executive order aims to close that loophole and limit the distinction to only products that go from the farm to the grocery store exclusively in America.
That's right. Farmers Union is proud to have been a long, strong supporter of country of origin labeling. Cool. And this goes hand in glove with that. It is insane that right now, for any other product out there, in order to carry the product of the USA label, it has to be substantively, almost entirely produced here in the US. That's common sense. That seems very logical. And yet when you get over into the meat sector, you are allowed to bring product in from somewhere else, reshape it, recut it, and stick a product of the USA label on that. That doesn't make any sense. It shouldn't be an exception here for farmers and ranchers who work hard to produce that product here in the US. And so if we are going to use this label, it ought to be the same as every other product in the US that bears that label.
Well, a couple of other items addressed by the executive order here that I want to touch on. The first being merger guidelines for rural hospitals. The Biden administration has asked the Federal Trade Commission to review and revise their merger guidelines to ensure patients are not harmed by mergers. And that's a big deal, as we've seen through the pandemic when rural residents have struggled to find adequate and accessible physical and mental health care within a relatively close proximity to their home. We know that 139 rural hospitals have closed during the past decade, and that's something that has to be addressed.
Look, anybody who lives in rural areas knows just how important it is to make sure that we have a strong rural health care program. If you have a hospital that closes that may be 30 minutes away. And now in order to get the level of care that you would have received there, you have to travel an hour and a half or longer. That puts rural residents at a huge disadvantage for those who may be in areas that are better served by healthcare. These mergers are part of what is accelerating that, but it is a complicated issue, and there are lots of reasons why rural hospitals struggle, but we need to be doing everything we can, including this merger provision, to make sure that rural residents have the same level of care, same access to healthcare. And of course, we could go on and on about costs and so forth, but the access, first of all, to rural healthcare has been, one of the unfortunate reasons why rural deaths related to the pandemic were higher. We need to make sure that rural residents are being treated in a fair and equitable manner with regard to access to healthcare. It's pretty simple.
Also, banking and finance play a huge role in agriculture, and the executive order encourages more choices in banking and credit in rural communities, as it encourages the Department of Justice to provide more robust scrutiny of banking mergers and make it easier for customers to change banks. And the statistics tell us that 1 in 4 non-metropolitan counties are without a single bank. How's that affecting your members and the ag industry in general?
Well, look, I think our members, broadly speaking, always like to make sure that they have their local community that they can serve and support, their local bank, maybe a farm credit system, to access the credit and the capital that they need to run their farms and so forth. It's better for our rural communities if we can go local on those things. And so I think this is one of those provisions, right, that gives me also a little bit of hope for really fundamental problems. We're talking about banking here and access to capital and credit, but this issue of mergers, whether we're talking about hospitals, or we're talking about community banks, or we are talking about seed companies, or we are talking about anybody else in this line of ag industry, the level of mergers, which is being driven by just the biggest guys continuing to try to be competitive against the other biggest guys, we are creating markets that are no longer competitive. I would argue are no longer capitalist, because you have such a monopolistic and oligopolistic, which is just a few very large players in a market. This is not good. This isn't good. We talk about farmers, but we also talk about the effect that this has on their communities, on their neighbors and so forth. So if we're talking about hospitals, we're talking about banks, it is far better to have those banks independent, have competition in this marketplace. It makes everything work better.
Well, there are a couple other issues not specifically addressed in the executive order, but that remain at the forefront in the discussion on ag policy. And one of those is a lack of access by many in rural America to available and reliable broadband internet access. And that's one that I know that you know all too well in your own life. I know the USDA through the last Farm Bill has allocated funds to many states and communities, and that's moving in the right direction. But still, a lot needs to be done at the telecom level to actually get that infrastructure in place. And many seem to be dragging their feet because they don't believe there's enough critical mass in some of those rural areas to make a business case for making the type of investment that would be needed to bring broadband to those areas. From an advocacy standpoint, what more can be done to keep that ball moving down the field?
Well, I'm encouraged that there's a lot of discussion and a lot of money being put in this, but we have to be a little bit careful here, because we have seen in the past that this issue also attracts a lot of attention. It's a feel-good issue for a lot of people, and there's been money that has been put in this space. But too often in the past, that money has gone to build out and make stronger the existing networks. And the piece of this that we continue to be missing are those places, those communities that either have next to no access to broadband, or are at the very end of lines where there's really inadequate service and connection. This is obviously a huge issue for farmers and ranchers who always want to make sure that they are connected to market, connected to technology, so that they can make their business, their operations run as smoothly as possible. But as we are seeing more and more, this is also a huge question for families in general, and for even rural students. We have to make sure that we have this connectivity, or rural communities will continue to kind of erode and be at a disadvantage to others. I think the last time you and I talked, Brent, I had to travel 30 minutes from the farm to get to my local library to get a signal strong enough to be able to have a conversation. Now, that's one thing in the media, but when that is affecting farmer and ranchers' ability to connect to resource and to connect to information and markets, that's a huge problem for us. And so I think that this emphasis is good. I will be watching it very carefully to make sure that the money and the resources that are going out there are being used in a way that is going to have the biggest impact on rural communities.
And to get back to that healthcare issue too, I mean, it's become a healthcare issue that so much of this through the pandemic, if you don't have access to a close by medical provider is telehealth. And, you know, if you've got to drive to the McDonald's parking lot 15 miles away just to have an appointment or to get your kids' homework done, that's a big issue.
Yeah. For me there locally, it's the Burger King truck stop combo. But you're absolutely right. And I think that this dives in, you know, on the healthcare front, you know, another issue that we talk a lot about, and that's farmer stress and farmer mental health and so forth. And we talked about a lack of access to healthcare. On the mental health care front, it is much worse. And so we continue to partner and work collectively with Farm Bureau, with Farm Credit, and a number of groups out there to really not only just remove the stigma on treating and getting help for farm stress and for mental health challenges, but also making sure that there is a connection to those resources. And when we talk about mental health, it is lots of times far easier for folks to make an internet connection with somebody, not just to access the care, but to also get over that stigma. If you're in a small town, you may be hesitant to swing by the local community and park in front of a mental health provider's resources. We hope to overcome that stigma, right? We want access to care. But for some folks right now, we just want to make sure that they get care and they get qualified resources and help. And so internet and telemedicine is one big piece of that.
Another key issue here is trade, and we're just starting to see the Biden administration outline their game plan and get to work on their trade priorities. What are your organization's key priorities on trade, and what would you like to see the Biden administration get done?
Well, we need these markets, right? And I think what's one positive thing right now is the fact that the U.S. trade representative, you know, the president's key trade advisor and the person who goes around negotiating the terms of contracts and checks upon existing trade agreements and so forth. Catherine Tai is someone that has received very broad support, initially at least. As somebody who's been tracking this space for a very long time, I can't remember a moment where you had labor groups, farm groups from the left, the center, and the right. You had all kinds of agriculture and industry leaders who were all supporting her. I think what that speaks to is that she is somebody who is not just well-versed in the ins and outs of these trade agreements, which are insanely complicated for most of us, but also has the skill and the tact to be an effective negotiator. And that's going to be important as we deal with existing partners here close by, Canada and Mexico, as we deal with more uncertainty, if you will, about the future of trade with China and where that's going to end up. And as we engage the EU and in particular the UK on potential trade agreements there and enhancing those, I think she recognizes how important this is for agriculture. And so she is taking a very, proactive approach, make sure that the terms of existing contract of agreements are being met, is being tough in negotiating stance. We will see where all that goes. I think, we'll continue to be pushing along with this broad coalition for as much growth in the trade arena as possible.
Well, from the outset of the Biden administration, it was apparent that sustainability and climate were going to be a major focus. And it's often been said that farmers and ranchers are the original environmentalists. From that standpoint, what do you hope to see accomplished with climate change, sustainability, and carbon sequestration? And how are National Farmers Union members doing their part?
Well, first of all, right now, it's making sure that farmers and ranchers can continue to farm, right? I mean, for those farmers and ranchers who are dealing with fires, dealing with smoke, dealing with extended droughts right now. They are living it right this moment. And so I think too often as we talk about climate change, you can kind of get into this, cloud, if you will, of how much carbon can we capture and what are the ways that we can verify that. But I think when you distill all that down, what this is about is making sure that we can continue to farm the land generation after generation. Yes, provide the food and so forth, but make sure that that soil is going to continue to be able to give. As we are dealing with these challenges, it is absolutely critical that we build in resilience into this. And so I keep talking about some of the positives that, what I would say in this administration is that as they have talked about this issue, they have not only stressed that resilience and assistance, but they've also stressed voluntary methods. I think there is a recognition across all parties and all types of agriculture that what works for my farm in southern West Virginia is not going to work in Iowa, is not going to work in the plains of eastern Colorado. There is so much diversity in climate and in the style of agriculture. And so we have to have lots of different solutions. I think that there's a huge push to make sure that we're using existing conservation programs that farmers and ranchers already like and they want to use. And then there's a lot of education and research that's going to have to go to it. We will continue, like all ag groups, to make sure that whatever we're doing is not going to come with a lot of additional restrictions, but comes based upon science and is voluntary. And I'm encouraged that you have, we are working with Farm Bureau and a huge list of about 80 environmental, agriculture, forestry, and food companies, industry leaders, to come up with solutions and work with the administrations on things that will work for all of us. And so we'll see where all this takes us. But right now, it's at least a positive step.
Well, this would be a good time to plug the National Farmers Union website at nfu.org. There are regularly updated blog posts and columns on climate, and it's a great place to go educate yourself on some of those issues.
Yeah, thank you. We welcome everybody to nfu.org and also follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, your favorite social media. I'm not sure I know how to get into all of those, but it's obviously growing media. So,
well, on the topic of the environment, the Biden administration appears poised to go back to the well again on the waters of the U.S. and revise the definition of what waters of the United States means. And this has been a political football for many, many years that's left farmers and ranchers stuck in the middle. The EPA has said it will seek input from agricultural stakeholders to make sure that they come up with a definition that takes into consideration the interests of farmers and ranchers. But this constant narrowing and expanding of the definition has become very exhausting and very expensive for many in agriculture. From your organization's standpoint, is revisiting the Clean Water Act in any way a good thing for agriculture?
I think it has the potential to be a good thing, right? We'll be watching this one carefully. Right now, basically, EPA has said that they want to look at this and they want input from everybody. Now, we'll see where this ultimately takes us. Certainly, I think everybody's radar screen is up because of what this could potentially mean. And we're hoping to prevent real problems here. But here's another person at EPA, Michael Regan, the new administrator, who from the outset has garnered a huge amount of support. Some of his biggest cheerleaders for getting through included both environmental groups and, for example, the National Pork Producers Council. Those folks that you don't normally see necessarily lining up together, he comes out of a number of environmental and ag challenges and fights in North Carolina, and is highly respected down there. Now, how is that going to translate into a Biden administration and what EPA ultimately does? We'll be waiting and seeing. But he has taken a careful approach here. He has asked everyone in agriculture for their input on this. And so we're hoping that this can be a positive thing.
Well, we've talked about all these pressing issues, which are many, but we still haven't even talked about the biggest story of the past 18 months, which is the effect the pandemic has had on agriculture. First of all, how do you feel agriculture has rebounded, and what are some of the underlying challenges that still exist?
Well, I think I'll start with the underlying challenges, because I think that that's what we are focused in on very much right now. And that is, I think we have an ability to have a more resilient food and farm system that's going to be good for rural communities, good for farmers and ranchers. But unless we can really address some of the level of competition and concentration in the industry and so much power in just so few hands, I think that we are going to continue to struggle if we can't address that. So the executive order, some of the bills up on Capitol Hill that are bipartisan in this space, I think sets us up potentially for a good thing. But, we know that the challenges are still there. This was going to be the year finally that we were going to get over that hump. And we now have prices high, but for a lot of producers, they're going to have crops that either going to have to be plowed under or left for what they can get out of crop insurance. It is devastating to see a lot of the challenges that folks are facing right now on top of the previous years. We're going to continue to need help, but there is hope for a better future out there.
Well, as we look at the back half of 2021 and beyond, are there any other key legislative priorities that the National Farmers Union is focused on?
Well, look, we're going to be keeping an eye on anything that affects that marketplace and make sure that we can get that. I think, I've talked a couple of times about, while you have the president issuing the executive order, I think that there are a lot of bills in place and lined up to help in this space that will make things more permanent and put it actually into law, which will be good. I think that this is our window right now, quite frankly, if we want to find those bipartisan solutions that can attract a lot of broad support, because once you get into years 3 and 4 of any presidency, it becomes almost impossible, even for issues that have a broad level of support, to get through. So now is our window to make things even better for folks, and we're keeping track of a number of issues on there.
Well, President Larew, before we let you go, could you tell us a bit about why farmers should become involved in the National Farmers Union and how they can find out more information about the organization?
Absolutely. Farmers Union actually was created in 1902 because it was focused on bringing power to independent farmers and ranchers and benefiting their communities. That remains our thrust and our forefront today. We have seen a lot of challenges over the last decades, but we want to see a bright future for farmers and ranchers. And so for those independent family farmers and ranchers, we would obviously invite them to the family. Check out the webpage, check out your state farmers union organizations. We believe in working cooperatively and building co-ops and also working with our neighbors to build a better community. So we'd encourage you to check it out, nfu.org.
Well, President Larew, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here today on Inside Farm Life. And I'd love to invite you to come back here in a few months for another status update as we work through some of these key issues.
I appreciate it, Brent. It's good to visit with you.
Again, we've been speaking with Rob Larew, the president of the National Farmers Union. Like a championship caliber baseball team, your fungicide has to be tough, and Concept Agritech has the solution many of America's top growers trust. BioAid is an EPA-registered fungicide that delivers an initial contact kill of a wide range of fungal pests and is safe to the user and the environment. To find out more about how BioAid can help you increase your yields and deliver a higher return on investment, visit conceptagritech.com. Concept Agritech, technology where you need it most. Well, next up on Inside Farm Life, the drought that has plagued much of the Midwest and Upper Midwest has been one of the major headlines in agriculture in 2021. And on this week's Market Talk report, we hear from Jesse Allen about how the drought conditions are affecting the markets. Jesse.
Well, thank you very much, Brent, and welcome into another Market Talk update here for Inside Farm Life. This week, we talk with Jim McCormick of agmarket.net. He was my guest on last Tuesday's episode of Market Talk. Jim and I talked quite a bit about a lot of the same factors that we've been hearing about in the trade lately. Weather, of course, one of the big ones, and it's an East versus West battle right now, essentially, with the good crop in the East versus the not-so-good crop in the West that is burning up with the heat and dryness there. And that's really what we're seeing shape up here as one of the biggest factors we're watching right now. Jim and I talked about North Dakota, specifically in the Northern Plains, and how been hearing talk of producers abandoning not only spring wheat up there, but also a lot of trouble for corded soybeans up in that region. Here's what Jim had to say about that, and also he tied that into the issues we're seeing with the Brazil safrinha corn crop and how it all goes together.
That's what we're hearing. Interesting enough, I talked to a friend who's an adjuster for a crop adjuster here in northern Illinois. He's waiting for the phone call, decided they should send him up there to North Dakota right now to essentially start writing off the spring wheat crop, essentially letting them do what they're going to do with it. There's been no decision yet on the corn, but this crop, I think, is cannibalizing itself. This heat, the dryness the next 10 days, unfortunately, it's going to probably be the death nail on the crop there, and it's going to be another year of crop insurance payments for the North Dakota. And like I said, now the real question is those poor yields, can they, as for the size of the crop, can the crop potential in Illinois, Indiana, maybe even parts of Iowa offset it? And like I said earlier, time will tell. But, the crop modeling that I've said, a lot of people put this yield somewhere between 174 to 178, 179. The fact of the matter is, at a 179 yield, Jesse, government's arguing the carrot's going to be around 1.5. I disagree with that because the one thing they're not telling us is demand. The demand they're using for exports is about 300 million less year on year. That doesn't seem logical when you look at all the grain buying China's already done. But more importantly, the crop in Brazil got hit with another frost freeze this week. The government's at 93. A lot of the private guys are sub 90 million metric ton. Some people are down to 85, and that was before this frost. So now you got a situation then going in Brazil, folks, that we just don't know how much grain's going to be exported. It's going to be a battle. The domestic people, where the crop's being hurt is in the South. They're actually importing over 20 cargoes of corn from Argentina. But the guys in the North, the exporters, that's how they make money. They want to ship it out. And it's a situation that we don't know what's going to happen, but we do know this. If that crop is below 90 million metric tons, that's about 400 million bushels of corn that would normally be on the world market that's no longer there. And for the most part, by our calculations, there's only one country that can make up that shortfall, and that's the United States. And hence, that's the argument I give that why that demand is understated by 400 million. So if you raise that demand to 400 million, even with a trend yield of 179.5, which is 3 bushels better than the best crop we've ever had, your carryout, when it's all said and done, could still be closer to 1.1, just like it is this year. So going to be a lot of volatility and demand, talk this year.
Continuing on that, I proposed a question that I feel like there's a lot of bullish upside in the corn market here. Jim gives us some thoughts and perspective on how we could be trading a little more sideways for a while than we think.
I agree with you, but I think here's what's going to be the struggle right now. I think in the near term, our group is arguing maybe we're kind of stuck in more of a sideways type of trade. I wouldn't be surprised as the $6 level kind of caps us at the high end of the range, and the $5 caps us at the low end of the range. We're just going to trade sideways simply because the problem I see, Jesse, is the customers in the Eastern Corn Belt. They thought they might have had 40, 50% of their crop sold. Maybe it's only 30 or 40 because the yields are so big there. So as the market gets up toward 575 to 6, the Eastern Corn Belt producers, I think, are going to want to step up and sell some $5.50, $5.75, $6 corn right out of the field. On the other hand, because of that tight carryout situation I was pointing out, if I'm an end user and I saw what the price of corn is trading at in July of this year, I got to believe if I can own corn down near 5 or sub 5, I got to buy as much as I can. So I agree with you. I think the upside's there, but the big problem is going to be is how quick will the government especially react to that demand that I anticipate is going to show up. Mind you, it took them forever to admit that the Chinese buying was at hand earlier this year. So that carryout number, I believe, will shrink, and I think it will get closer to 1.1, but that may not be to January. So I think there is a decent shot we'll take out these highs, but it may actually be Jan, Feb, March before the summer highs are taken out when we get a little bit better peek of what's going on in South America.
That's comments with Jim McCormick of agmarket.net from last Tuesday's episode of Market Talk. You can watch the full episode, listen to it, and find all of our past episodes, video and audio form online, markettalkag.com. This has been the Market Talk update for Inside Farm Life in Nashville. I'm Jesse Allen reporting.
As always, you can find Jesse's daily market updates at markettalkag.com. Again, that's markettalkag.com. And you can find him by searching Market Talk on Facebook. He also appears on the American Ag Network, and you can hear him host Your Ag Today, weekday mornings about 6:50 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM Satellite Radio, Rural Radio, channel 147. Well, next up on Inside Farm Life, are you in need of a new work vehicle on the farm or ranch? Have you considered a van? The Hot Rod Farmer, Ray Bohacz, says it may be just what you need.
Welcome to Bushels and Cents from Farm Machinery Digest Radio, heard exclusively on SiriusXM Channel 147 Rural Radio. I am your host, Ray Bohacz, the Hot Rod Farmer. And never forget, it is not what you make, but what you keep that counts. As your operation grows and the need for another vehicle arises, think out of the box and consider a van instead of adding a new pickup truck. The enclosed body of a van may have some limitations over the open bed of a pickup, but also brings many benefits. The load is out of the weather, secure from being blown in the wind while driving, and safe from theft. For example, the Ford Transit offers factory four-wheel drive and engines up to 365 horsepower to carry the load at a lower price point. Agriculture runs on machinery, profits on reliability. Visit farmmachinerydigest.com, where steel and soil meet.
And don't forget to check out all of Ray Bohacz's great multimedia content at farmmachinerydigest.com. You can also hear him host Farm Machinery Digest Radio on SiriusXM Satellite Radio, Rural Radio, Channel 147. It airs each Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern and again on Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern, so I hope you'll go and give him a listen. Well, with the business out of the way, now it's time to take things back to the country. And this week's special guest is Nashville singer-songwriter and Grand Ole Opry performer Erin Enderlin. She has a new single out, Somebody's Shot of Whiskey, which we're going to talk about here in a bit. But first of all, Erin, welcome into Inside Farm Life.
Thank you so much for having me.
How you been?
I've been doing pretty good, just rocking, living that dream.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I tell you what, I know some folks are jumping on here who might be unfamiliar with your background. If not, if they are, first, shame on you. But second of all, before we go any further, tell us a bit about how you got from your hometown in Conway, Arkansas to Nashville, Tennessee.
So, like you said, I'm from Arkansas, and I grew up, I don't remember really a time when I wasn't in love with country music. I grew up listening to a lot of my grandpa's record collection and watching TNN with my grandma, and really fell in love with it. And after high school, I ended up getting accepted to Middle Tennessee State University, which is right outside of Nashville, and moved up here and started just, you can really learn so much in Nashville just by going out and watching music. There's so much talent here. So going out to shows, songwriting rounds, shows, everything, and just soaking that up and working on writing, and started co-writing for the first time, and playing. And I was lucky enough in my senior year of college to have a song recorded by Alan Jackson and Patty Loveless, and he put it out as Monday Morning Church, put it out as a single. So I got to start writing full time, and did that, and it's been amazing. I had cussed by a lot of my heroes like Reba McEntire and Terry Clark and Randy Travis and Joe and Rory and folks. And I always wanted to make my own music. I did make my own music, but, be able to record it on records and really tour with it. And the last couple of years, I've finally been able to do that. Some guys, Jim Brown, who goes by Moose, and a guy you might know, Jamie Johnson, produced a couple records on me. And Jamie's been kind enough to take me on the road sometimes. And just really, I love that whole process. I love getting to see someone else sing my song, and it's such an honor, especially, folks like Alan and Terry and folks, they write their own songs. They don't really need other songwriters. So if they fall in love with your song enough that they're like, oh yeah, I got to put my thing on this, that that just means a lot. But there's something about being able to do the whole process. I love going in the studio with musicians, them just the most insanely talented musicians here in town, and getting to do that, and then getting to take the songs out on the road and watch people's faces when you're singing, and get to connect in that real intimate way is just, I love it,
Well, how about we hear one from Erin from her Faulkner County LP. This is I Can Be Your Whiskey on Inside Farm Life.
On the floor every night, you come back for more. Order of Maker's own eyes, chase it with a lucky strike. I can be your whiskey, I can be your cigarette, I can drown the memory that you're trying to forget. If If your loving cup needs filled up, she left you bone dry empty. Baby, I can be your whiskey. My love's stronger than 90 proof. Just wait and see what one kiss can do. And if you think it's too good to believe, don't worry, baby, 'cause it's rounds on me. I can be your whiskey, I can be your cigarette. I can drown the memory that you're trying to forget. If your loving cup needs filled up, she left you bone dry empty. Baby, I can be your whiskey. Baby, I can be your one more chance, your one more try. My love can get you so high. I can be your whiskey, I can be your cigarette. I can drown the memory that you're trying to forget. If your loving cup needs filled up, she left you bone dry empty. Baby, I can be your whiskey. Baby, I can be your whiskey.
Well, I'd say what just about every artist on the planet had to deal with the fallout of the pandemic in some form or fashion. And, everybody had to try to find a way over about a year and a half or so to try to game plan and figure out how they were going to come out on the other side better and be able to hit the ground running once things started to open up. How did you set yourself up for success during that period?
It was tough in a lot of ways, but I feel really blessed that I've had a couple of family members get sick, but no one ended up too sick. And we've all been able to do all right to make it through. And, mentally, I knew that it was going to be tough because I had a big year planned with a lot of stuff. And so I knew that the worst thing I could do is sit around and not do anything. And I had been wanting to learn how to record on my computer, just good enough so that I could have like a good guitar vocal. If I wrote something that I was just like, oh, this is special and I want to send it to someone, or, just have a little more control over being able to create. And so I didn't have any excuses of not having time for that. So I sat down and I did it. And I started recording just a couple of the songs that I love, cover songs, actually instead. And, got an idea to do a project called Campfire Covers. And I've done a couple of them now where I just kind of pick a little bit of a theme in my mind and do an acoustic CD, just me and my guitar, kind of like you'd hear if we were all just sitting around a campfire, of songs that I really love, and playing those songs that I grew up loving and just are what made me fall in love with music in the first place. I think that really, brought me back to just falling in love with music again. And I've been doing quite a bit of live streaming throughout the pandemic when I wasn't able to get out and tour. And that's been really great because it's not quite the same as sitting there in front of somebody and having that real life moment, but you still get a lot of, interaction through the comments and learned a lot of new songs. I started doing this thing called laptop karaoke where I'll just, if somebody asks for a song, if I know it enough that I could maybe ruin it, I'll play it. And so going to do that. And the Opry's been kind enough to have me out a couple of times. They were luckily able to continue this last year. And so that was really special.
Well, you are being a bit modest here because you've kind of been the queen of the live stream throughout all this. I've seen you on here a whole lot, and you really had a chance to open up and show more of your personality. What's that been like, being able to, just kind of give fans maybe a behind the scenes that they wouldn't have had the pandemic not happen, and you just gone out on tour and just done show after show that way?
It's funny because somebody was saying the other day, talking about the live stream kind of stuff and what I've been doing, that you really can't help but show off your personality when you're sitting there for an hour or two, in that kind of situation. And I guess I hadn't even really thought about that being part of the deal, but it has been a little bit, I think. And maybe that's good. I think it's, the older I get, the more I just want to be myself. I want to play music I love. I don't want to try to be somebody I'm not. And, this last year doing the Facebook live streams, that's definitely, I just get on here and this is what you see is what you get kind of thing. And so that's been really cool. And my fans are so amazing because, I really wanted to get back in the studio and be making new music for them. And they've, through the Campfire Covers projects and the live streams and things, have really supported me and allowed me to go back in the studio and record some new music. So that's been pretty amazing.
In 2018, you were named one of CMT's Next Women of Country. And if you go back and look at those classes dating back to when that program began in 2014, most of those women went on to be really successful in the country music business. What does it like being part of that sorority, especially because of all those artists? Most of them trend more toward the pop country, and you're one of the standard bearers in there for more of the traditional true country sounds out there.
It's really incredible. I've had the good fortune to have some really amazing supporters in the music industry. Some of my heroes and some of the folks that work here, publishers and managers and other folks. But when I got into that class, it kind of was really on the cusp of me putting out this new record that now looking back, I'm not sure even how I met her, but somehow I ended up meeting Leslie Fram and we became friendly, and I had played her some of the new music and done a video for one of the songs on the album. And if you don't know Leslie, she's the head of CMT, and she's been a huge advocate for all artists in general, but especially female artists when we're not, necessarily being able to get played on the radio the same, artists of color. She's not afraid to go against the status quo a little bit. And, I wasn't at a place in my career where I really even thought about getting on CMT Next Women. And she saw something in me that maybe I didn't even, have the confidence to see yet myself. And by her putting me in that class, it was really huge. I remember going to the event where she announced everything, and I was upstairs, and there were some, really big players in country music up there. And a couple of folks were asking me, "Oh, did you write with some of these artists that are on here tonight?" And I said, "No, I'm one of the artists that's getting inducted." And it really, sometimes Nashville can be a little bit like your hometown. It's a small town. I've been here since I was 18, and good, bad, and ugly, they watched me grow up. And I think her doing that, her putting that stamp of approval on my record and my albums, helped make people think, oh, and get it, like, oh, she's an artist too. And I was also able to take that then, and as I was, trying to get gigs, some of the venues who I'm sure they get, how many hundreds of emails every day, and I hadn't been able to get a response from them yet, which is, no fault of their own. They're just, trying to find something that works, trying to figure out stuff. But when I could start putting CMT Next Women of Country, Erin Enderlin, looking, for a show, they immediately were like, okay, well, if CMT likes her, this is something at least I'm familiar with, you know? So it caught their eye a little bit more out of the whole pile.
That's awesome. I don't think people, even just in the Nashville area, get the immense amount of email traffic that bookers probably get every day. It's just overwhelming. But that's one way to stand out. Another way to stand out is to clean up at an awards show, which you have done very well through the Arkansas Music Awards there in your home state. You're named the 2021 Entertainer of the Year and Songwriter of the Year for the 4th consecutive year. That was after being named Country Artist of the Year in 2020 and Female Vocalist of the Year in 2019. And your last album, which in my opinion should have been Grammy nominated, was 2020 Album of the Year, just 2 years after your prior album, Whiskey Town Crier, was also named Album of the Year. That wasn't enough. Then Song of the Year in 2020 for Tonight I Don't Give a Damn, which you co-wrote with the great Jim Moose Brown and Jesse Joe Dillon. And in 2019 for World Without Willie, which you co-wrote with Alex Klein, Leslie Satcher, and Tara Thompson. Has to be quite a thrill for you to head back home there to Arkansas and be recognized for all that hard work that you put in Nashville.
It's really incredible, and they're doing a great job of really providing new opportunities for country music and acoustic music in Arkansas. And you know, I love where I'm from. I still go back there a whole lot. My family is all there, and so to have that hometown love, that's something special.
And if you ever want to have some fun, get on their website and start looking at the list of people who are in that Hall of Fame, because a lot of people you wouldn't even realize hail from the state of Arkansas.
Oh yeah, that's pretty stout.
I'll tell you what, as a songwriter, you've had a #1 on the Bluegrass chart for Rhonda Vincent, co-written by our pals Bobby Tomberlin and Jeannie Seeley.
Yes.
You continue to write with those folks. And as you noted earlier, songs cut by Alan Jackson, Leanne Womack, Randy Travis, Reba McEntire, and Terry Clark, among others. And those are legendary names and people who kind of stayed true to those traditional country roots and folks who are very selective about the music that they choose. In your opinion, what makes a good country song?
You know, I think it makes you feel something. Reba always says when she picks out a song that if it makes her feel something, she thinks it'll make, you know, it would be likely somebody else would too.
Right.
And I tend to like country songs. To me, a lot of country music has always been grown-up music, you know, real life stories, the good and the bad. And I don't know. I think to me, a lot of that kind of helps you feel not so alone. And I think that's something that we're all searching for.
Who among songwriters really stands out to you?
Matresa Berg, Gretchen Peters are some of my very favorites. Kim Ritchie, Radney Foster, Bruce Robeson. I think those were definitely a core group of writers I really followed, and Buddy Miller and Julie Miller. Oh man, there's so many I love. When I moved to town, I'd still be able to get to go out and see folks like Danny Dill, who wrote Long Black Veil, play shows.
Wow.
Which was incredible. Nancy Griffith. I could go on and on.
A lot of your songs that we just heard, I Can Be Your Whiskey, a lot of your songs revolve around the whiskey theme. What fascinates you about whiskey and its place in country music?
You know, I don't know. It just kind of seems like one of the best metaphors, you know? Which is funny because, I mean, if I drank as much whiskey as I write about it, I'd be in trouble, but...
Well, that was going to be my next question. Are you much of a whiskey drinker yourself?
I enjoy it, but I'm, you know, for a country music singer, I'm a little lightweight, so I like just to sip on it, you know.
What are your go-tos?
I also like a good old fashioned.
Yeah.
Well, Terry Clark actually turned me on to Angel's Envy, which is dangerous. I like Maker's Mark, Jack Daniels, Dickel. There's just so many good ones.
You're right here in the sweet spot here between Nashville and Kentucky here.
Yes, right in the belt, the whiskey belt.
I love it. To carry on that whiskey imagery, in March, you released Whatever Gets You Through the Night, which features background vocals from another buddy of ours and one of the nicest guys around, Dylan Carmichael, who's out there burning up the roads with a great single, Hot Beer, out there with John Party. Tell us about Whatever Gets You Through the Night.
I wrote this with my buddy, Jimmy Melton, who he's written tons of amazing songs, and y'all might also have seen him out with Jamie Johnson. He's been playing out with him for a couple years. He's also like a child prodigy on the banjo. I think he played with Earl Scruggs like the first time when he was like 8 years old or something. But he's an incredible musician, incredible writer, and just a great guy. And I took this idea to him because he really knows how to write a country song. And he's got such great melodies, and kind of told him some of the idea. And it was just one of those moments when the song comes together. You know, sometimes you have an idea and you're really in love with it, and you go in and you do what you can, but there's like this special something that you can't put your finger on, really, that has to come together just right for it to be what you hoped it would be. And this one to me is 100% like what I dreamed I would have with that song at the end of the day is exactly what I got. I love the imagery, the kind of fluid motion of it. And I love songs where you've got the narrator having a conversation with somebody that you know they're not actually having that conversation with somebody, but it's like the conversation you wish you could have with somebody. Yeah. The conversation you've had in your mind, 100 times.
Well, let's give it a listen. Here is Whatever Gets You Through the Night. Erin Enderlin with Dylan Carmichael on backing vocals on Inside Farm Life.
Bad cups of coffee, old haggard songs, roll down the window on a road that's too damn long, blur of broken white lines and flashing neon signs. Truck stops off the highway where the waitress wears a smile. In case you haven't seen one at home in quite a while, it all comes down to whatever gets you through the night. Another cheap motel room with the curtains drawn. You like the conversation, so you leave the TV on. Read the Bible on the nightstand, looking for a little light. Kill a couple beers, and if that doesn't work, that smooth Kentucky bourbon will burn till it don't hurt. It all comes down to whatever gets you through the night. I guess that's why you're calling, 'cause tonight you meet a friend, or at least someone to hold you, someone who understands. When it comes to being lonely, there ain't no wrong or right.
I love it. I love that video too. It's funny, the guy that was, I love making music videos. And the guy who played the lead was going to play the lead, canceled last minute. And my friend Erin, who's ended up in the video, he was Rory Feek's manager for a long time, Joey and Rory. But he's the only person I really know that's had like real acting experience. And so I texted him and I was like, I could happen to convince you to be in this video tomorrow. And thank goodness Aaron's awesome. And he said yes. So.
Well, if you ever get in that position again, you got my number.
Okay, cool. Good to know. Good to know. We'll put you to work.
There you go. Well, tell me a bit about the process of writing a song like that, because it seems like it's probably easier to get into a lighthearted song, and here you got one that's just kind of really ripping your guts out, and you get a handful of people in a room trying to come up with just the right words for a song like that. What's that like?
It's interesting because to me, I almost think it's easier to get in the reel.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just, you get the powerful feeling and stuff. I don't know, it's the kind of songs that I fell in love with. Mm-hmm. To me, it's harder to write more of a tempo, fun song because the lyrics have to be so spot on. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, well, I guess everybody has their own thing they gravitate towards anyway, but I don't know. There's something about that real raw emotion that you can plug into those songs that just, I guess, is more intriguing.
Does it turn into a therapy session?
Yeah. Except, like I said, it's funny because people are always asking, well, are these songs real or not? And I'll weave little parts of my life in there, or maybe an emotion that I felt, but it's not necessarily what you would think of based on the song. It's not, just verbatim what's going on in the story. It's more of just being able to kind of put yourself in the shoes of that character or the stories. I'm one of those terrible people that, like, you're sitting in a restaurant, breaking up with your boyfriend, and I'm at the next table and I'm like, okay, what are they going to say next? Like taking notes.
That's art. So you talk about the Opry. What's the count now? What are you up to in terms of Opry appearances?
I think I just did my lucky 13.
Excellent. I thought it was up there in that neighborhood. Does it get any easier from the first time to the 13th time?
To me, since I've been able to play the Opry, it's not that it's not been easy, because to me it feels like home. Mm-hmm. I have so much love and respect for it there, and I actually worked there for a while. So the first time I played there, I literally had to quit working there so that I could play. And so all my coworkers were out there, and it just like was having your whole family there, like a family reunion, and you were playing. And I don't know that I would have been able to do it as much if I didn't look out there and see all those folks, because I'm sure the audience back then especially didn't know me from Adam, but every one of my friends who was in there taking tickets and doing that, because that's what I did, was a hostess. All the hostesses told every person that came in that night who I was and that I worked there and that they wanted them to cheer extra loud for me. So I actually got, a standing ovation the first time I played there because they love me so much, my coworkers there. And the Opry really is, it's like a family, man. Everybody there, from the person that's helping you find your seat to the artist on the stage, they care about country music. They care about its legacy. And I don't know. It's just such a magical place. I usually get really, really nervous afterwards. It's like I had this out of body experience and I'm just going with it. And then that night I sit down and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just played the Opry again.
When we talk about the legends, people like the Bill Andersons and the Jeannie Seeleys of the world have really kind of taken you under their wing and made you one of their own.
Yeah, it's incredible. Both of those artists and writers, they're both just insanely talented. And I looked up to both of them so much throughout the years. I remember meeting Bill Anderson in his fan club line when I was 16. And Jeannie Seeley, I had seen her around town a couple of times, and I actually ended up sitting next to her at a Merle Haggard concert, and I had a card in my pocket and was like, look, I'm not a weirdo, but just look my name up. I want to write a song with you. And when I wrote with Jeannie, she said she'd never actually written that an appointment time before. And I guess, it's so interesting to me talking to some of those writers about the different ways that they wrote back then. But finally I convinced her, I guess. And I said, well, what's the worst that could happen? We'll have a real good time. Even if we don't write a song, And I think when I played the Opry one night when she was driving in and she heard me singing, I Let Her Talk. And I think that's what really finally swayed her.
And she continues to write with you. So you must have done something right there.
Mm-hmm. And Bill is he's so incredible. And I'll tell you what, I got to write Waffle House Christmas with him, which he put out and he did a video for. And he was kind enough to invite me to come out to the video shoot. And I figured, well, I'll just, sitting over in the corner or whatever. He had Tanya Tucker and Kid Rock and Jeannie and all these people there doing the video with him. And he goes, no, I want you to come up here and sit next to me. You wrote the song with me. And I don't know, maybe that doesn't seem like a lot, but the fact that he would even take the time to think about something like that is just incredible to me. And it really meant the world to me. And he was actually the first one that I got to have him introduce me at the Opry too, which was really special to me.
We kind of circle back around to the whiskey theme. The new single, Somebody Shot a Whiskey, was just released to rave reviews here and is even in rotation. I saw on Outlaw Country on Sirius XM.
So cool, man. Yes. It is, it's doing really well. I'm proud of it. I wrote it with a guy named Ben Chapman, who's an incredible artist. I think you're going to be hearing a lot from here soon too. But it's a little different style for me, and it's something that I've been wanting to try to write for a long time. So I'm really happy with it, how it came together.
Well, it's definitely true to that true country sound with the fiddle and steel. And, tell us about the inspiration behind that song.
Well, I was playing a festival in Kansas, and the main thing I remember about it is really hot. Well, and the folks were really nice, even though it was really hot. And they had tank tops for sale there that said, I'd rather be somebody's shot of whiskey than everybody's cup of tea. And I just was like, this is exactly, I get this. I identify with this. I'm going to put this in my back pocket, and someday I'm going to convince somebody to write this with me.
That's excellent. I love stories like that where you just find that little snippet of information and tuck it away and pull it out and turn it into a big old hit.
Yeah, it's weird where ideas for songs come from. I actually found I'd taken a picture of one of the shirts with my phone, and I actually found the picture the other day, and I was like, this is it. This is the beginning.
That's awesome. And you can at least get another social media post out of that.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't even thought about that. I ought to post it.
Well, without further ado, here's the latest single from Erin Enderlin. This is Somebody Shot a Whiskey on Inside Farm Life.
It's a blue ribbon morning after a black label night. Well, I got kind of out ahead because I was wound up a little too tight. But Jesus still loves me, even when I do the devil's ways. I'm just a honky-tonk angel with a little bit of hell to pay. I'd rather be somebody's shot of whiskey, somebody's rough around the edge. At least I can sleep well tonight, 'cause I stand behind the words I said. You can't make everybody happy, that's alright by me, as long as my baby loves me all the way from A to Z. I'd rather be somebody's shot of whiskey than everybody everybody's cup of tea. All my life I've been told I'm cut from a different cloth. And if I tried to hide it, it all come out in the wash. If I'm a little left to sing, well, I really don't give a damn. 'Cause I got all the friends I need to take me just the way I am. I'd rather be somebody's shot of whiskey, somebody's blue flame in the fire. Some are gonna see the rose, some are gonna see the briar. You can't make everybody happy, that's alright by me, as long as my baby loves me all the way from A to Z. I'd rather be somebody's shot of whiskey than everybody's cup of tea. You can't make everybody happy, that's alright by me, as long as my baby loves me all the way from A to Z. I'd rather be somebody's shot of whiskey than everybody's cup of tea. I'd rather be somebody's shot of whiskey than everybody's cup of tea.
Some are going to see the rose, some are going to see the briar. True words have never been spoken.
Yeah, it's all about that glass half full, half empty kind of thing.
Well, if folks want to download somebody's shot of whiskey, or they just want to follow all things Erin Enderlin, where can they go to do that?
They can download it on iTunes and Amazon, and they can stream it on Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon, and a whole bunch of other places. And they can catch me on Facebook at Erin Enderlin Music, and Instagram and Twitter at Erin Enderlin. And there's always erinenderlin.com, which will take you to all of those places.
So what's next for you for the rest of 2021 and beyond?
Well, I am going to be heading out next month with Tanya Tucker on the CMT Next Women Country Tour, and doing some shows with her this fall. And I've been working on some new music that, all I can say right now is somebody's shot of whiskey is not going to be the end of what you'll see from me this year.
Oh, I love that. And just in time for us to start getting some live tapings. Hopefully we can link up again for one of those. I can't wait to hear all the new music. Another big show that was just announced today, Wednesday, August 11th, 6:30 p.m. Central Time at the legendary 3rd and Lindsley in Nashville, Wild Heart Wednesdays. You're going to be performing with the great Carlene Carter, Tara Thompson, and Maggie Ball. That's a lot of star power there on one stage. If you're in the Nashville area, tickets for that show are just $12 in advance, $15 at the door, which is a tremendous deal. But if I were you, I wouldn't dawdle here, because that's a good show and a good chance that that thing's going to sell out before walk-up tickets are even a thing.
Yeah, I played there a couple months ago with a couple other really talented folks, and we sold it out. Dane, that runs the Wild Heart Wednesday show, she does a great job.
Where are some of your other favorite venues to play around there?
Oh, around here, I mean, well, I've gotten spoiled because I get to play the Opry, and I've gotten to play the Ryman, which you just can't beat that. But the Bluebird, I love playing there. 3rd and Lindsley is amazing. The sound there, oh my God. Kathy at 3rd and Lindsley, she is the sound person of my heart. Where else? Exit In is really cool. My buddy Kendall Marvel just announced that he's going to be doing a new Honky Tonk Experience show there this fall in October, I believe.
I saw that. That's another guy. We're going to have to twist his arm to get on here. We've tried, and it's the schedules just never align. So
he's awesome, man.
As are you, Erin. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on Inside Farm Life. And we hope you'll join us again here to talk shop, to share some new music, and just to hang out.
Thanks so much for having me back, and I can't wait to get to see you in person again.
And we want to thank you for joining us this week, and we want to remind you to subscribe to the Inside Farm Life podcast. It's available at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Deezer, Audible, and Odyssey. Each week, we bring you the best in agriculture newsmakers, hot-button industry issues, agriculture features, and the best in true country music, just like Erin Enderlin. We'd love for you to take us with you in the tractor, the combine, the sprayer, in the shop, the barn, wherever you are. That's the Inside Farm Life podcast. And if you haven't already done so, please follow Farm Life on Facebook and YouTube, and be on the lookout for farmlifemedia.com, which is coming in August. We'll have podcasts, an internet radio station, video, blogs, and a discussion page as we work toward our mission of building the largest and most engaged farm family on the planet. Well, the clock on the wall tells me it's time for us to get on out of here. So for now, for Erin Enderlin, it's Brent Adams. Let's meet up here again next week, shall we? And hey, bring along a friend.
You've been listening to Inside Farm Life, a production of Farm Life Media. If you have topic suggestions for future episodes, drop us a line at brent@farmlifemedia.com. And be sure to check out our website, farmlifemedia.com.